when we look at the incident of Prince Harry has flown over to see his father, and when we break it down, he probably spent more time, well, just about the same amount of time in the air than he actually did in London. Do you think that the King was looking forward to seeing Harry? Did Harry have to come over? We can look at it in many different ways. It could be a case that he's a son who was desperately wanting to see his father after hearing the news, but also his dad had plans. He had healthcare plans.
Well, his dad phoned him up and told him that he had cancer, and I think any son who's all that distance away would be very worried about it and upset, and wanted to probably go and see his dad, particularly after all the stuff that's gone on. But my understanding is that it was his decision to fly. It wasn't the King had not asked him to come. And before he could really do anything, Harry was at the airport saying, "I'm getting on this plane." So I think that the King himself, as I understand it, was preparing to go off to Sandringham with the Queen and just have a bit of quiet time, after all the dramas being announced. And then all of a sudden, Harry's on the plane, so they had to hang around until he arrived, and that's why he never really gave him very much time. I mean, I think the official narrative is that, the King was touched, and he probably was touched that he'd made that effort. But I think also there was a little bit of being boxed into a corner here, and that, of course, he then had to stay around. I mean, one of the reasons he probably didn't want all the drama is because by the fact that Harry flying over, it does give the suggestion that the condition may be a lot worse than it actually may well be. And I think a lot of people would be sitting there thinking, it must be bad because he's on the plane. And that sort of, Harry brings with him a certain drama. We've all been discussing, haven't we, whether or not, or will there be a reconciliation with William and the King and everyone. And so it stirs that whole pot.
Because if you look at the timings as well, we know from, we had the photographers outside Clarence House because we were expecting Harry to turn up. So we knew Harry turned up. He then raced towards Clarence House. The King was ready to leave. So the helicopter had landed at Buckingham Palace before Harry was still on the A4 or the M4 heading into London. He only got, we timed him in and out, so he only got 45 minutes. He's flown 5,000 miles. Do you think that was fair for the King to give him that short amount of time? Why would he be only given him that amount of time to see him? I've got my theories on this, but I was just wondering what you think.
I mean, the Queen was with the King, and let's be honest, he wasn't too complimentary about Queen Camilla and his book, Spare. He wasn't very complimentary about her in Netflix. He wasn't very complimentary, they don't get on. So number one, that's there. But equally, they haven't really had a lot of contact, the King and Harry. I know that there were stories saying that he'd reached out Harry before when his dad was going in for that benign treatment for prostate, but I don't think that reach was ever actually connected. So there's not been a lot of contact. And, that would then bring its own level of complexity and drama, which the King doesn't need at the moment. He just doesn't need it. And, the royals do stick to a sort of pretty military clock. It would have been all worked out when he was going to be flying off, because you have to get the helicopter pilot there, you have to get clearance, you have to get all these things. And so his plans had to be changed. And one thing the King doesn't like is changing his plans. So 15 minutes isn't long, probably long enough for a kiss, hello, and maybe a hug, and wish him all the best. And then he was back.
You're right. I'm interested about that the fact that it brought unwanted drama, because he'd had his care on Monday, and part of that would mean we don't know. We can't delve into speculation about what kind of. We don't know what kind of cancer. We don't know what kind of treatment he has had. But there will be, almost like when the Queen during COVID time, she had Operation Bubble. So there will be a kind of care plan for the King, and so we know that. He won't meet Sunak face-to-face until the 21st of February, and he's gone to Sandringham, where there's plenty of space to roam, plenty of fresh air that he can relax, and maybe his immune system's down after the care. So there may be an element that having Harry jet over from the United States to see his father as a surprise, they had to keep it short for maybe kind of health reasons before the King kind of went off to Sandringham.
I think it's possibly that, but I think it's also more to do with you don't want his blood pressure going up, because you only have to, when you're sick, like the King's not very well, he's obviously very serious, whatever way you look at it, whatever type of cancer it is, he's undergoing treatment, and the best thing for him is calm. And let's be honest, after the initial kiss and hug, love you, Dad, hope you get better soon, what issues are going to get raised? Things that will send his blood pressure rising. So my feeling is it was probably best to just keep it on a very low-key basis. Glad that you came. But, from the outside world, he's flown in. He's got half an hour with the King. The Queen had said, right, we got to go. King says we got to go. And then he doesn't even say, well, why don't you stay in your old room at the palace? He has to book a hotel room, and he's off on the plane the next day. So, everyone tells us that, well, the narrative is that, he was touched and it was great. Maybe it's the start of a rapprochement. I wouldn't bank on it.
Well, that's what we're being told, isn't it? That maybe it was a sign of optimism because, there was a gesture of flying over, the King agreed to meet him. But taking a step back, is Harry not getting the message here? So he's been evicted from Frogmore Cottage. He third row at the coronation, and then he gets half an hour or 15 minutes with his father after flying across the country to.
Well, I think that's exactly it. I mean, look, Matt, the coronation, he sort of left with his tail between his legs. It was a bit embarrassing, wasn't it? I mean, everyone thought he was going to. I think he thought at least he'd be in the front row. He should have read the Sun. I mean, it was clear where he was going to sit. He was going to sit with the non-working royals, but I think also there hasn't been a lot of context. So maybe he was fed up with it and said, the King's not available now, the King can't speak to you now. And thought the only way I'm going to get to see my dad, or actually have any contact, if you are, feeling a little bit, I don't know, so guilty, but you're feeling a bit lost, is to get on a plane and go and see him. And in that respect, I admire Harry for doing that, because if he wasn't getting through, and he said, well, I just want to see my dad. And, I know there's been a lot of bad blood, and, things that like being accusations of racism and all this sort of stuff. It hasn't gone down too well at the palace. We know it hasn't.
We speak about racism. Obviously, Meghan didn't come. The accusations have been made, last year.
Very strong accusations.
Would the king have wanted to see Meghan? Do we think? I mean, is it wise that Meghan didn't come? She hasn't said anything publicly, or was it wise just for Harry to come?
I think, given what's going on with Catherine sick and things that have been said about her. The Queen obviously just wants to look after the King, she's like there, making sure nobody upsets him. And it's not just his son or his sons or his family or anything. All the other courtiers should be saying, "Oh, can we just look at this paper or that paper?" The Queen will be making sure that he's protected and that's stopped. And I think personally that whatever way you look at it, Harry flying over, I can understand he's a caring son. Is somebody that might be feeling, maybe I've got this all wrong. But he probably just wanted to say, wish his dad the best. But it's a clear message there. You're not really, you're certainly not forgiven, and you've certainly done a lot of damage.
You've got to do a lot more than fly 5,000 miles.
Well, the fact that his brother didn't even bother to acknowledge him. I mean, they were very close. I mean, they were close can be, and he didn't even bat an eyelid. There was no way that was going to happen.